Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So our topic for this month is around owning your okay, our boundaries, what's okay and what's not okay, and how am I going to implement those this month, especially with the holidays. And so can't think of a better way to kick off the holidays than spending time with Monia. And so I'm just going to pass it over to Monia to lead us through a gentle practice.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, those at home watching the replay. My name is Monia. This week I'm feeling particularly low energy, as always. I think every time I'm doing this call, I'm always low energy, which is fine because that's what this is here for. So today we're going to focus on owning that we're okay, but also focusing on our lung capacities and knowing what our limits are, and within that, creating a boundary to know that where we're at is where we need to be, and we don't need to do anything beyond that. So our practice today will call for lots of side body positions. As always, any of the offerings that I offer are just offerings. So if that or anything that I give you doesn't feel good for your body, know that you can adjust it, and I'll give tons of options to make sure that you have some room to be within the practice, and be led if you'd like to be. I would recommend having at least two blankets. You can use throw blankets, you can use bed blankets, whatever you have is fine with me. If you have yoga blocks, ideally two. If you don't have yoga blocks, ideally something just to elevate your legs at some point, or like a bolster or a big thick pillow, just something to give you some height. And then any pillows that you have at home. This is my fun studio pillow, but you can use bed pillows, you can use sofa pillows, and basically any other props uh, that you like to have around you. And if there are essential oils, you would light some candles, dim your lights, pause this recording, and then adjust your space so it's cozy because we will not be standing today. So you can do this from bed, you can do this lying down if you prefer to be on your mat and create a space to let your body know you're in practice mode, be on your mat. So with that being said, let's get started in our first pose, which will be child's pose. If it's too much for you to be face down, if that's too much of a sensory deprivation for you, you can be on your back, and I'll show you that position to start, and then I'll show child's pose. So if you're taking your recline child's pose, you'll have a blanket folded somewhere along the middle of your mat. If you're in bed, you'll put a pillow in the same space. And so you'll lie down, put your bum on the blanket. If you're taking this recline, you'll lie down on your back. You want your butt to be right towards the edge of the blanket, so that way there's a downhill slope of your spine. And then bend your knees towards your chest, and you can be here. If you want to move around the space, you can always open the knees. You can turn it into a happy baby into any degree. You can also cross your legs and just snuggle yourself here. At some point, we'll have our arms up and overhead when you're in your reclined child's pose. And so I'll cue that with direction to go into. If you're taking a child's pose on your shins, what that looks like is opening your blanket up so you have knee support. And then you'll take your pillow. This will be dependent on what you feel the most comfortable in. One block will go like this way, the widest way, in line with your chest. So your chest will fall on the long top side. And then you'll have it right in the middle of your knees. So it's pretty close. And you'll take another block a long way so you have a T on your mat. And you can start off here with the ribs catching the block between your knees. The block can be at the lowest height or at the highest height to support your head. If you're liking a lot of support, you'll turn your block to the lower height. You'll take your pillow over the blocks, and then you'll let everything snuggle. Your arms can go between the space of the blocks, then you can turn your head to one side and be there for a little bit. So that's how we'll start our practice, either on your back or on your shins. And just take a moment getting yourself comfortable in this space. Decide how far apart you want your legs. If you're looking for a lot of information with your breath, which we'll focus on today, in our own personal capacities, you'll have your knees closer together, or make sure the block is right on your ribs. And so that way, when you breathe in, it's going to push the back body back and fill it up a little bit. And so decide what feels best for you in these spaces. And then you can take a moment wherever you are, rocking your head side to side. If you have your head on your block, you can massage the eyebrows. And if you're on your back, you can just rotate the head side to side, opening up the neck. We'll just take a few moments here, just observing our breath, getting ourselves a little grounded for our practice, noticing what we're feeling and where we're feeling it if you'd like to. And as you're welcoming in the idea of focusing on your breath, just begin to notice how you're breathing in. If you have a deep awareness of your breath, you might notice which nostril you're breathing into. Notice where the breath is going. And for some of us, we may have a difficult relationship with breath, especially if we have a lot of lung things happening, a lot of diaphragm things, sometimes even our endobellies or bellies that can be bloated can cause a lot of breath restriction. And so as we move through our practice, I cue a lot of breath, but know that you don't have to breathe with me. If your breath count is shorter or longer, that's all okay. It doesn't need to be at a certain pace to breathe. And you observing and creating that capacity for yourself with your breath is you owning your okay, it's owning your boundary and knowing that you don't have to try to be somewhere that someone else is directing you to. And that's really what we'll focus on this practice is setting those boundaries for ourselves with our breath, with our awareness, with our goals, physically, mentally, emotionally. Spend a few more moments here, allowing the shoulders to soften. If you have your knees on your chest, maybe let the belly soften. And think that whatever's below you, your body is kind of melting into. Let the body soften a little bit more. We'll spin about 3 or 6 rounds of breath, depending on your breath capacity. And just notice it. Let's not manipulate it right away. And about another cycle or two here. And then you'll begin to take your fingertips down if you're in your child's pose with the shins down. And you'll just lift your head off the ground and start to wiggle your waist side to side, just letting one shoulder drop towards knee and then the other. And if you're on your back, you can start to extend one leg and the other, creating a little bit more space in the side body. And you can let your head drop towards your chest if you're on your shin. And if you're on your back, you can let the head rock side to side. And do that a few times. And maybe you get a little bit slower and really lean into one elbow, one fingertip, maybe lean into the other one and create that space in the side lung, the side waist. And see what's happening with the breath in whatever direction you're taking it. And do that a few times until you feel like you've had enough. And then once you're ready to stop moving, but know that this practice, you can always continue to move and doesn't have to be super active. It can be very still or wherever you want to go. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you're on your shins in your child's pose, you'll take your head block to the left and you'll begin to turn your body as much as it feels good. For some of us, we might want to take our belly all the way over our left thigh and let the belly rest on the thigh and bring the block to the head. For some of us, we might just go a few inches to the left and that's our twist. We don't need to go far. The goal isn't to get into the biggest twist. It's just to create a little bit more space in that right side waist. So from the front, if you're on your shins, you can be in this space here, just slightly turn towards the left. If you have a lot of space in that right chest, you can bring your block all the way over to the left and you can hold your hands to the left. But as you do, try not to hike up your hips so far. And if your hips are really high, take a blanket or a pillow underneath your bum. But you can be in any variation of the side twist. And if you're on your back in your reclined child's pose, you'll take your left hand around your knees and you'll extend your right arm up and overhead. If you have a big twist or a lot of space in that right side waist, you can cross your ankles, doesn't matter which one's on top. And you can take your left hand to your right wrist and just gently pull your arm over your head. We're just opening up that right lung. That's what we're doing right now. And of course, do it in any capacity that feels the most comfortable for you. And of course, you can go forward into it, you can go back, you can kind of play around with how deep or how light you go into these spaces. So let's spend a few moments here just letting our body readjust to being in this little bit of an open space. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more activation, you can press down to your left shin and start to crawl your right fingertips over towards the left front side of your space and start to open up the armpit here. And then if you want to get a little bit more open, you can start to let your nose turn towards the right and then let the right fingertips lift off the ground slightly and lean onto the left. You can bring the block with you, or you can remove your head from the block and just lean, and then you can rock back and forth. And if you have your arm up and overhead, you can again take that right hand, bend it over your head, and then re-extend. If you're feeling really open, you can bring your left forearm down, and you can lift your right arm up. You really get into that space. But again, this is your practice. Don't go beyond what feels good for you. Just see where you want to be at. And it doesn't have to be this really routine movement. It can be really organic and just let the body go whichever way feels the best for you. So let's spend a few more moments here in stillness, just breathing into that lung or finding a little bit more movement. And exhale. Try to lengthen it out to whatever feels good. Another breath or two. And then from here, you'll gently begin to bring your fingertips back down to the ground. You'll realign your right arm with your shins if you're on your back and start to bring yourself up only halfway and just crawl yourself back through center. And you might rest your head down on your block and just notice any subtle differences, if any. Let the forearms rest. Maybe you turn the palms up towards the ceiling. If you're on your back, maybe you lift your arms alongside your ears. And spend a few moments here just observing the right side lung, the left side lung, and not to compare them in a way that you want one to be like the other, more just to be aware of the fact that you have two different lungs. Be aware of what they feel like, knowing that one has more breath capacity than the other. That's the way anatomy works. And that they're probably not going to ever balance, and that's fine. You might not feel any differences. It might just feel like your chest. You might not feel like anything, and that's all fine. Spend another moment here. And then we'll start to transition to the other side. So if you're on your shins, your fingertips will turn back down, and you'll decide how far you want to bring your head and your chest towards the right. And it might be pretty low. You might only just move the side of the waist a little bit. Or if you want a deeper twist, you can press the palms down and shift the belly all the way on top of that right thigh. Let the chest rest on the center of the knee, and then let the block and the head connect again. If you're on your shins, you'll wrap your right arm around your shins, and you'll extend the left arm alongside your ear and find that length. And you can also grab your right hand with your left wrist, reverse that, and go up to the side. So decide again how deep you want to get into these spaces. And spend a moment letting the body adjust. Try not to jump right into movement before you figure out what's happening. The side is different. They're always going to be different. And so don't try to just jump into what happened on the first side just to create that idea of a balance. Spend a few more moments here. And once you feel grounded in the space, decide if you need a pillow or a blanket underneath your bum if your hips are really elevated. And then you can begin to extend that left arm long. If you're looking for more space, you can crawl the fingertips forward. If you're feeling pretty active, you can begin to roll to your right eyebrow on the block, and you can reach that finger a little bit more to the left, letting the fingertips get lighter. Or you can begin to lift that left arm up, and you can make circles, opening that lung, that space. Know that you don't have to go in any specific direction. You can let it be fluid, maybe just opening and closing the elbow side to side. And if you're on your back, you can wave that arm around, open and close that space by letting the elbow bend over the head and then away from the ear. Let it be fluid. If that doesn't make sense, do what feels good. It's usually what I cue when I feel like words are jumbled. Just do what feels good here. Let's do another few more cycles of just being in this space. And just think that you're breathing into that left lung. Notice what it feels like to have the belly or the chest maybe making contact with something, and where it's to the point where you can't breathe in anymore because you have this boundary set for yourself. A few more moments. And slowly you'll come back through center, and you'll begin to find that space and settle in for just a moment. And if you're on your shins, maybe this time you reach the fingertips forward. You might have a little bit more room for your neck to grow longer. And you can walk the arms right to left, and you can have them as far apart as the knees as you want, or you can have it on the sides of whatever you're sitting on, let the shoulders kind of drop in. If you're on your back, you'll open your arms right to left and just reach through the center of the chest. We'll take a few rounds of breath here. And there might be some contact with the ribs on a block, the ribs on a blanket, the knees on the chest. And see that with the breath, you'll start off with a 2 count. You'll breathe in for 2, let the breath make contact, the chest make contact with whatever it's touching. And you'll slowly exhale as much as it feels good, letting the air sip out of the nose. And every time you breathe in, you'll go to a different number. So maybe you breathe in for 3, slowly exhale. Breathe in for 4, slowly exhale. There's going to be a point when you can't breathe in past that number. It may cause you cramping. It may give you a sharp pain. It may not feel good. So know that you don't have to increase that number. You can always pull back. It's not a race to get to the highest number. We're just using these numbers as information so that we set a boundary. So that way we want to go back to this space. We know that 3 is our limit. We don't want to breathe in longer than a 3 count, because if we do, bad things happen. Let's try to feel good, keep that energy in that space. And maybe you roll your forehead side to side, massaging your eyebrows, especially if there's some tension. Go slowly. For some of us, it could be a lot of sensation in those eyebrows. They hold a lot. We're scrunching them often. Take another moment here. And then we'll start to transition out of this space. And so a few options here. If you would like to change your child's pose and rest in space a little longer, you can. If you're ready for a little bit more movement to start to wiggle out that energy, you'll find yourself in some type of tabletop. And you can start out with the knees pretty wide and the hands pretty long, especially if there's a lot of sensations happening in the pelvis, which for me today there is. And you can start off slow, letting the hips go side to side, very, very subtle. And it's gonna give you a lot of information if there's a lot going on there, so don't try to go too deep. If you have the space to keep shifting the hips a little bit more, you can lean a little further back and then let the knees go side to side, letting the hips move. So from front, knees are pretty wide, small circles look a little like that if you can see. And big circles, you're really leaning back and letting the shoulder drop side to side. And again, you can decide the capacity of that you like. If you're on your back, you can begin to rock the knees side to side. If you'd like a bigger sensation, you can lift the shins off the ground and then rock the pelvis side to side. But try to keep your shoulders on the ground if you're looking for that pelvis tilt. So let's do a few more cycles here of movement. Try to keep your head low, and if you can, round your spine eventually and let the pelvis go backward so the head descends down. And then notice how if you're going around in circles now, as you go forward, there's a little bit more space to breathe in through the nose and fill the front body. The nose can start to rise. And as you exhale, go around yourself, sending the pelvis back, pressing into your hands to keep the balance. You can also do this on your forearms if it feels a little angry on the wrists. And go in the other direction. It might not feel good to go in the other direction. So know that you can go back to the first way that you went. Know that the movement can be smaller on this side. And make it your own practice. We'll take a few more moments here. And when you're ready, start to bring yourself into a little bit of a seat here. We're going to start to open up the lungs a tiny bit more. So you'll take your blanket and you'll roll it into a log, a long way. And you'll take a block or a pillow for your head, closer towards the back right side of your mat. If you're on your bed, which you can do the same way actually. If it feels good to be on your side, you'll have this log, and ideally we want the log to go right under the side of our rib. The bigger the roll is, the more intense it is. So know that you can make this pretty small. You don't have to roll your blanket up all the way. So you'll start by scooting yourself on your right hip. You can have the knees stacked. For some of us, our knees won't touch in this space. You can take a pillow or a blanket between your knees. Sometimes our foot does something weird with that top leg, so you can take a block between your foot or a pillow to make sure everything's supported. So it doesn't need to be a super active pose here. And then you'll get yourself comfortable and you'll try to touch your rib, touch the side of your chest, and that's what you want on your blanket. And you'll get that space squared away. You can extend your right arm long. And then eventually, once you feel like you've got yourself settled in, your head will start to fall to your block and you'll find the side body space. Now, for some of us, it'll look different. And so it might not feel good to have your hip especially if it's a little bony on the ground. You can put a blanket or a pillow under your hip. If you want a lot of intensity, you can roll your blanket up higher. You can even take a block under your chest. And if you do want to block, if you like that yin space for your practice, you'll keep your head pillow and you'll let the block come to the side of your rib, and then you'll turn your block up a height so that way you can rest on the block. And it's really going to push the lungs forward if you lean back. So decide what you'd like there. I don't want to block today, so I'm not going to use a block, but you can if that's what feels good for you. So get into that space, spend a moment getting adjusted. It might take a few times to wiggle around and find the right posture for yourself, the right height for things. Over time, you can change it. You can lower or heighten things if nothing is absolute here. And start out with your hands both facing the front, if you can. If not, you can bend the elbows together. You could take one hand to your side, but try to keep the shoulders somewhat stacked because we want to notice how it feels to have a lighter breath capacity, a smaller space. We just want to see what that feels like to start to breathe into that right lung. The legs can do whatever it feels good. Maybe you stagger the legs, you can straighten them, that's fine. If being on your side feels a little bit intense, being directly stacked, you can scoot your butt back and fall slightly more to the front of that right hip and let the chest kind of cave in towards the front of your space. So spend a few moments here just noticing the breath capacity here with having the shoulders stacked to some degree. And breathe in as much as it feels good, trying to direct the breath to the blanket. Over time, the neck might get a little bit cramped because you've relaxed the muscles in the neck, being in the space for a while. So you might eventually lower your block or make your pillow smaller somehow. And the more you lower the block, it's going to be a bigger bend in that side waist. So know that it'll get a little intense once you lower down. You can always come back up and adjust your blanket height. Spend another moment here with the closed shoulders. For some, this might feel amazing. This might be enough. You can begin to explore what it might feel like to open up the lungs a little bit more. So by that, you can begin to lift up your left elbow towards the ceiling and almost like you have the fingers interlaced for a moment. And just be here. You can open your bottom hand, make a fist with your top hand, and put your fist into your hand just to give you a little bit of that boundary again. So that way you don't go too far. That elbow, you can still see it above your left eye. We don't want to make this a big opening. And if you're like, I don't want to hold my arm over my head, you can just let the arm rest in a block if it's still there, the second block, not the head block. So decide what that feels like. And again, come back to that breath breathing in the right lung and out to whatever feels the best for you. Just notice the contact. Notice how it only allows you to breathe so deeply down because you have this blanket supporting your rib cage. Just for another moment. And then eventually, if it feels like you need more, you'll begin to let that left arm go behind your head. And a few things can happen. You might have your block positioned back enough so you can roll to the back of your head. Ooh, this feels so great for my spine. And you can open up and let the blanket catch your shoulder blades behind you. And you can let it be fluid and roll yourself back down, massaging that right rib cage. Beginning to that like myofascial release. For some, it can be a lot of sensation. So go very slowly. Know that you don't have to move. If you fall back and decide, I just want to be here, this is exactly what I need. You can be here with the chest open, with the knees facing towards the right. For some, this may be an aggressive twist. And so maybe you keep the arm over your head. Maybe that top arm comes forward. Maybe even close the knees some. Start to find out where is your limit, not to push yourself there, but to know that you have space to pull back. Meet yourself where you're at. Own you're okay, our theme for this month, own where you're at. And that's really what it is, having chronic illness. Oftentimes we try to keep up with society and let ourselves be in this really active, go, 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 gotta keep up, gotta do the things, but that's not the lifestyle for chronic illness. It's not what we're able to do. And so know your boundaries. That way, when you come off of this mat and off this practice, you know how to integrate it into your regular life. Put another moment here in movement or stillness, creating a little bit more awareness for what's happening with the breath, not so much trying to calculate it. And then one of two things will happen, and we'll visit the space twice, and so know that you can try both sides, but just do what feels good naturally the first time. The first option is you'll take your head block or pillow block out of the way for a moment. Option one is to roll completely to your back, position both of the hips back to the ground, and then let the blanket catch the shoulder blades on both sides. Let the elbows go up and over, and you'll cactus the arms. The legs can do whatever you want. You can rock from side to side. You can take Supta Baddha Konasana, recline butterfly pose with the knees wide and the feet together. You can take the feet wide and knock the knees in. You can straighten the legs. You can do whatever you like with the legs. But what we're looking for here is a little bit of an open extension in the chest. You can decrease the blanket size. You can make it bigger. If you don't like that, that is fine. What you'll do is roll to your belly, or if you don't want to be on your belly, right hip stays down. You're going to twist the top of the blanket and the chest connects. So you're going to be almost at your neck. Again, you can decrease or increase the blanket height. So option one is to be somewhat in a twist with the right hip down. If you're okay with being on your belly, you can put a pillow underneath it, or the belly can come flat down to the ground, and you'll have the blanket, the rolled log, in the front of your chest, right below your neck. If that feels too intense, you'll adjust it so it feels comfortable. For me, I want to be my belly, so I'm going to stay here. And if you're on your belly, you can bend your knees and you can massage the front of the pelvis, rocking the hips side to side. For some, it might feel great. For others, it might not feel good, which for me, it doesn't feel good. So I'm going to stop. But know that you can keep moving. It feels good to lift one leg and just kind of hang it out, roll the ankle out. You can do that. You can switch to the other leg, roll the ankle out. But now, whether the blanket's on the top of the chest or the back of the shoulder, see what's happening with the breath. Can you direct it a little bit past that roll? See if you can let the breath land somewhere near the bottom of your rib cage. It doesn't have to be physically there, it could be energetically. Maybe you create a visual and think of the breath coming in through the nose. It could be sparkles, it could be a rainbow trail, it can be literally whatever you want. But just vision it coming in through the nose, traveling down the throat, going past the neck, filling up each lung, and then maybe energetically tracing the bottom of the ribs. And again, you don't have to try to breathe that deep. Again, for some, it could be a little overstimulating. And just notice what's happening with the mind as you're breathing in. What are the storylines you're telling yourself? Are you expecting more, or are you allowing your breath to do what it wants? Are you pushing yourself to breathe deeper, or are you honoring your capacity? Let's be here for a little while longer, thinking about the belly softening. Spin about another moment or so, and we'll transition to the other side. And if for whatever reason, one side or the other doesn't feel good, or you don't want to visit that side, know that you can do the other side again, or find something different that might be speaking to you. Okay, so let's start to transition to the other side. And again, our sides are different. You can kind of wiggle around in between taking child's pose, taking a little bit of wave to a tabletop, and wiggle the hips side to side or in circles. Once you found the end of your transition, you don't have to rush. I'm just getting myself set up. You can stay in that transitional space. But once you're done, take your time. You'll begin to figure out what's happening on the left side. So eventually you'll start to set up your roll. You'll just turn your direction and you'll scoot that left hip down. And then you'll take your right hand to the side of your chest, right where you can feel that like firm space. And you'll let your blanket come to that area. Start off with your blanket first. See how that feels. You can let that left hip scoot a little further back. Take your block behind your head. If that feels pretty natural and you're like, I need a little bit more, then you can slide that block underneath where the blanket is and give yourself a little bit more height in that rib. Again, if the knees are far apart, if you're feeling a lot of sensation in the pelvis, take some pillows or blankets between the knees, blocks between the feet, pillows between the feet. Legs can be straight, they can be staggered. Find that space. But again, we're going to start off with our arms closed in front of us. We want to kind of decrease that shoulder capacity to start. We don't want to splay ourselves open. Suddenly we're very uncomfortable. So allow yourself to get situated here. You might notice immediately that your blanket might be too high, it might be too firm. And so just take things out. Give yourself some healthy support. And just notice what's happening with the breath. And can you direct it into the blanket? And again, maybe it's that 1 count, maybe it's a 2 count, maybe it's a 7 count. The goal isn't to get to the highest number. The goal is to be aware of what your capacity is. Own your limits, own your boundaries. Just another moment or so. And over time, again, your neck might soften and you might want to lower your block to create some more space for that openness that you gave yourself. And if you push your block back enough, you can begin to lift up that right elbow overhead. You can tint it to the ground. You can open the bottom hand like a cup, and you can make a fist with that top hand and let it rest into your arm to give yourself a boundary. Make sure that you can still see your right elbow, so that way you're not opening too far right away. You want to see your right elbow at the corner of your right eye. Spend a moment here, letting the hips kind of descend, noticing what changed, if any. And if this feels too intense, bring yourself back down, close those shoulders up. But if you need a little bit more, you can begin to extend that right arm alongside the ear and then roll your chest open and back and let your head roll along that block. Oh, so good for me at least. And then let the shoulders rest on that blanket. The back of the arm can go straight. It can tee out like a goalpost behind you. And it might feel good to be here and just let the chest open. It might be enough, or you can find a little bit of organic movement and letting the shoulder close in front of you and massage that side rib. And slowly open up the elbow and lean back. And maybe you move with your breath. Maybe you invite in some different arm movements, maybe just rocking that arm forward and back, flossing the shoulder, but really let it be your own thing. It's your body. You know what feels the best, or you're learning what feels the best. And so give yourself that space to experience. And you might accidentally put yourself in a space that doesn't feel so good, but we're going slow. And so right when you feel that pinch and that a little bit of a sting or awareness, know that you can pull back. Again, the goal isn't to get to the ending goal, the ending point. There's really no ending point. The goal is to just be okay within ourselves and let that be enough. There's been a few more moments here and stillness, movement somewhere in between. Just let the body begin to expand and open, or close and contract. Another few moments here. And then when you're ready to begin to transition, you might take the other pose. If you found yourself on your belly, you might explore what it feels like to lay on your back with the blanket underneath the shoulder blades, like so. And then maybe this time you take your head to a block, and you can take your elbows side to side with the hands over the head and create a little bit more support for the neck. You can also be on your belly, do the same thing, except your chin will be on the block, and that'll open up the front of the neck. Each of those things might give you a lot of information. As always, to proceed slowly with caution. Don't try to just jut your chin on your block and open that neck up right away. Don't try and put your block on the highest height, because that might give you a little bit of claustrophobia with the neck and the chin so closely connected. So just spend a few moments getting your neck organized. And if you like a lot of big neck stimulation, a lot of big, big, big back bends, you can roll your blanket up higher, or two options actually. I often like a lot of big back bends. For some of us, this is very, very, very intense. For some of us, we need that intensity. You can take your block the long way. Your shoulder blades, just where your blanket was, is going to catch that block. You have a block for your head. And you let the shoulder blades catch. and then the head will catch the head block. Now, this could be enough for some of us. It's very, very intense. So know that you're pretty elevated with that back body. So if you don't like back bends, if you don't like heart openers, do not do this pose, please, and thank you. But figure out which pose calls for you. And if you are tired of having your chest open horizontally, you can do it vertically. You can take your log right behind your back. If you're doing this with blocks, you'll make a train, like a choo-choo train with your blocks. And you'll let your butt sit right in front of that blanket or pillow and lower yourself down, let the shoulder blades spill on either side of the blanket. Legs can do whatever feels the best for you. Arms can do whatever feels the best, which for me is cactusing them out like a goalpost and letting them come alongside my ears. And of course, you can be on your belly. You can find a different place for that pillow or blanket. If it's too much to be at your chest, you can move it entirely. And now that you've kind of figured out the right side long, somewhat and the left side long, see if now maybe you can think about the lungs lifting away from the spine as you breathe in any capacity and breathing out. And some people like to have a little bit more information. So maybe you take your hands to the ribs just below the chest. As you breathe in, you'll slowly begin to pull the hands away from the chest, creating a little bit of pressure energetically, if that makes sense. Let it be slow, like you're trying to move your hands through molasses. And as you exhale, you're going to gently push the space between your hands and your chest down. And we won't make contact till the end of the exhale, whatever that feels like for you. If you're on your belly, you can cactus your arms and push the palms away from the ground, just to give you a little bit more information, and you can push the palms back down. And it might be too much. You might just want to be still and just focus on the sounds of your space, the sound of your breath. You might consider the mind softening. Just notice what's happening here, what you're feeling, where you're feeling it, if you want to. And start to build a relationship with the breath. Have a conversation internally. It doesn't need to be met with words. It can be met with energy. We'll be here for a little while longer. And so if you want to change the position of your legs, if you're feeling really cozy here and you want to take another blanket or pillow over your belly and your pelvis and just let that rest. If you have a heating pad, it would be so lovely to put a heating pad on your belly or your low back. You can rock along that blanket if it's along your spine, leaning to one hip and then the other. And self-soothe. Give yourself some nourishment. If you feel really stable with that blanket under your spine or your shoulders, you can begin to take your knees and your hands and give yourself a little bit of some activation with the chest. But know that you don't have to be here. You can let the toes stay on the ground. You can even take your feet to blocks if you have them close by. Start to let yourself settle if you haven't yet. Maybe you add in some breath with movement, lifting the arms up and overhead or along your side and swimming them back towards the body as you exhale. You can roll out your wrists, you can roll out your ankles, you can let your feet sway side to side. But really, we're welcoming in rest. We're allowing our breath to lead us into a space of resetting. So that way we can begin to calm down our nervous systems and then let the body soften and then welcome in more breath. Breath is our energy, breath is our prana. Breath practice is pranayama, and that's kind of what we're doing in our own little ways today. Let's spend another moment or so here. And we'll do a few more things. And This can kind of be at your own leisure. One of the best ways I find when I'm having a lot of belly and pelvis pain is to give myself a little bit of support from the ground up. You can do this with, if you have a chair or an ottoman nearby, you can do this with blocks on the highest height. I'll actually show you a few ways to kind of be in this space. So option A is you can take your blanket over the block so you have a little bit of support. You can take support for your knees. And if the knees feel too tender, you can also take a pillow. If you want to create another boundary for yourself, you can add a pillow after I'll show you. But you'll start out on your shins and you'll start out on a long tabletop. And you'll walk your hands in front of your blocks and you'll just give yourself a measure. What we're working towards is having our chest go downwards so our belly can kind of drop and we have a little bit more space in the front of the chest. For some, we don't want to be this low. So option A is you can take your forearms to your blocks, you can interlace your hands, and your head might touch that pillow or blanket. And if it doesn't, you can take your pillow and find a little bit more height so your head can rest. And then you can have your knees as wide as you like, and then you can be in this space letting the front body open. We want to be mindful of our shoulders. If you can feel pinching in your shoulders, your armpits are showing too much. I know that's silly, but I want you to try and think that your elbows are moving closer together, like your elbow creases are trying to look up towards the ceiling to create that a little bit of structure in the chest. So that way you can hang out here. Now, this might be a lot of activation for some of us, and that's okay. If that's the case, if you're near a bed or if you're near a sofa or an ottoman, you'll bring that near you and you'll make sure you make it soft with a pillow or blanket. And you can let your body drape over that. You can let your chin rest. You can take your head down. And you can try and find a space to let the body soften. And again, it might be enough to be here. If you're like, I don't like my belly so low, you can take yourself into an elevated child's pose and just let your belly snuggle on the thighs. You can kind of make this at your own thing. So again, you can be low in this upward climbing child's pose. You can be in a supported tabletop. If you have yourself positioned kind of cleverly, you might find your forehead on whatever it's at the edge of, and you can roll your forehead to find that massage space for your eyebrows. And if you're using your blocks, you'll stack your blocks. And you'll bring your forearms to your blocks, and you'll let the chest ascend, but you'll be mindful of those armpits. And if none of that feels good, find somewhere in between it that makes it feel a little bit more available to you. And maybe if you're on your back, you just lift your arms up and overhead and grab your opposite elbows or interlace your fingers. So spend a few moments rocking around. This will be our last active space. And so if you want to make this a little bit more fluid and you want to move between a little bit of a back bend, letting your pelvis drop, it could be a big back bend if it's your first one. So you'll go very, very slowly. And you can also press the shins down and bring yourself backward. Maybe you like those big back bends and you bring yourself into a baby cobra, which is laying all the way down on your belly. Not as dramatically as I just did. And you can bring the hands outside the chest. You can gently press yourself up, creating a tiny back bend. You can also find yourself in a Sphinx pose with the forearms down, the legs extended. I wouldn't really recommend an upward facing dog unless you know what that is and if you like that space. I'm not teaching that today, but you can totally do it. It's in your practice. So find yourself in any variation of a back bend, Sphinx pose, baby cobra, an elevated tabletop or down slope tabletop, or an upslope child's pose on your chair. So be here for a little while longer. You can make circles with the hips, moving around the shoulders if that feels good. You can integrate some cat-cows, rounding the spine, dropping the belly. You can find somewhere in the middle, making head and neck circles. And again, let your body kind of do what you want to do. You're at home, and hopefully you're in a place of privacy where you can kind of let your body unwind and snuggle around and be a little bit more intimate and fluid. Start to really embody those relationships. Embody the body. That'll be our next class. All right, let's spend another moment or so here. And then we'll get ourselves set up for a final pose. Now, if there is a go-to pose that makes you feel totally at ease, you'll take that pose and disregard my offerings. That's totally okay with me. If you want some guidance, if you found yourself with a chair, you'll keep that chair and you'll have your pillow behind you. So that way you have a little neck support, your chest will be very open. And so it might not feel great now to have your back totally flat on the ground. You'll have your second blanket with you because we're gonna snuggle. And option one is if you have your ottoman, if you found yourself next to your chair or whatever you elevated your forearms on, you'll scoot yourself as close as you can. Your feet will go on top of that space, the backs of your knees might catch if your chair is low enough. And you'll lie down and you'll somehow drape your blanket over your body and you'll be in this space. If you have the room, you can take the feet wide or the feet around the chair or whatever you have and let the knees go wide, whatever you'd like. If you don't have a chair or a sofa or anything like that, you'll take your blocks, you'll put them on the highest height, and you'll take your blanket or pillow, ideally a pillow. If you don't have it, you'll have your blanket and you'll put your blanket on top. If you're using a blanket, be very careful, it's wobbly, so it might drop. So be careful about how much pressure you immediately put on the blocks. If you're using a pillow, it's a little bit more stable, but still wobbly. One shin finds the block, the other shin finds the block, and then gently lower yourself back down to that pillow, and then dramatically throw your blanket over your body. And you can be there. If none of those feel good, you can also find your comfort space. You can lie back down on your side, whatever side you want. You don't have to do both sides. You can lie on a flat back, on your spine. You can lie down to your belly. Spend a few moments getting settled into the space. And then I'll do a little bit of breath mapping, and you can follow along. You don't have to breathe with each direction. You can just let the gaze internally, your internal gaze, find those different spots. And for some of us, we might not be able to find all the different spots, and that's fine. It's just information. And so you can follow along. You can just let yourself drift off into whatever space that you'd like to go into. But just spend a few moments finding a natural rhythm of your breath, whatever that feels like, whatever that looks like, just let it be natural. We've been doing a lot of breath awareness. And so I'd like for you now to let go of that awareness and just focus on the different points that I might offer to you if you'd like to receive them. When you're ready, if you are, you'll bring your awareness to the center bottom of your ribs. And then you'll begin to travel up to the back of your right lung. And then move across your back body and find the tip of your left shoulder. From the tip of your left shoulder, find the center of your heart. And from there, find the bottom of your outer right rib. Travel upward to the top of your right shoulder. And go all the way around your back body to the outer bottom left rib. And find yourself at the top, at the hollow of your throat, the middle base of your throat. Let's do that a few more times. Try and bring your awareness to the center bottom of your ribs. This time travel to the back of your left lung. Move over to the tip of your right shoulder. And find the center of your chest. Go all the way over to the bottom outer side of your left rib. Travel up to the tip of your left shoulder. Travel around the back body to the outer right rib, the bottom. And the bottom, middle, center of your throat. One of those spaces stood out for you. You'll kind of linger in that general region. You might begin to think about what that looks like. It could be anything that you want. It doesn't have to be anatomically correct. It might be 2 or 3 spaces that stood out for you. For the next few moments, just allow the body to kind of dance around, the mind to dance around those spaces, and let it drift off into a little bit of a silent meditation. Again, to come back to the breath. Don't try to manipulate it. Just notice how you're breathing, what that might feel like. And that's where you're at this evening, right now. That the moment of your breath in this instance doesn't determine what it'll feel like tomorrow or what it felt like in the past. This is where you're at today, right now, and that's okay. And spend a moment honoring your body and your practice for all the things that it can do, all the things that your mind can do, all the ways in which you showed up to support yourself today during this practice, during our time together. And know that in the way that you honored yourself right now, in this moment, you can also do that in any point of your life outside of this space, off of the room that you found yourself in today. If there's an affirmation or a feeling or a direction that you want to give yourself to focus on for the next month until our next session, find that. Maybe it's just owning that you're okay, that this is your okay, and this is fine to be here in this space as you are. Maybe that's the direction that you go into. In a moment, solidifying whatever that is, you'll breathe into that sensation, that experience, and then you'll let it go. And know that you gave it space, you've honored it, and now it's out there and it'll happen the way it needs to for you. You can stay as you are, or find yourself in a seat, taking your time, keeping the head heavy and low, eyes closed or soft gaze. You might bring your hands across the top of your chest. It might feel good to cross your arms and bring it to the sides of your ribs. If you want more expansion, you might bring your fingers along the sides of your chest. And find a few spaces that might feel good for you. Maybe wiggle around into it for a moment, making sure that's where you want to land. And at our own pace, we'll take 3 or 6 rounds of breath together to close our practice. So when you're ready, find your breath. Your palms can come together at heart center. Thank you all for sharing your time with me. My name is Monia. I offer one-on-one sessions if you want to work together on practices like these or really whatever you'd like. We'll do this again in 4 weeks. So sign up, watch the replay. Thank you so much.